Hey, good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu, dobroho renku, and kalimera. Welcome to That's Life with Evolution. I am your host, Evolution, and I have a very special guest today. I have Sean Young in the building. How you doing, Sean?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
Hey, man, it's a great day in Kansas City, Super Bowl Sunday. I'm sure it's going to be a mess later on if we get that W.
Yeah, if you guys get that W, it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be a riot.
Oh, man, I tell you what. We've seen it before, but I think this time it's probably going to be a lot more than what it was in the past, which is really ridiculous.
Guys
uh,
might get a Taylor Swift concert.
right? Oh man. So Sean, for the people who don't know who you are and what you do, can you give them a brief description of who you are and what you do?
Yes, sir. So first off, my name is Sean. I am a U.S. Army veteran. 12 and a half years. Got medically retired out of the Army for traumatic brain injury.
Mm,
And over time, that would lead into some more complicating symptoms, PTSD, and stuff like that.
mhm.
Um, I got into podcasting as a form of my own recovery, just as a different alternative. And at first, I didn't really look at it as such. I looked at it as I'm just talking to people, and then somebody pointed out, "Hey, man, this is part of your program now. Like, this is something that you do to maintain your sobriety, your recovery." And so going on 4 years strong sobriety and almost 2 years in podcasting. I have my own show about addiction and recovery and mental health disorders. And I also have another show about the supernatural and the paranormal.
Hey man, that is fantastic, and congratulations on your 4 years of sobriety, man. That's impressive.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get going, I'm gonna go ahead and highlight the sponsors: JG's Lounge, TGBTG, Golden Diamond Productions, Leia's Question for providing us questions to get us going in the right direction on our shows, and Vibe VYV comes in a little vial. You shake it, sniff it, and it gets your juices flowing, so you can be more accurate or whatever. If you want to support the show and support Vibe, it's Lucian 15, Lution 15. And now that we got all that out the way, uh, let's get into Leia's question. So today's topic is a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Um, and Leia's question is, um, how can we use our mind better? Um, your thoughts?
Man, how can we use our minds better? I think it really starts off with treating our brain right,
Okay.
eating healthy, ingesting healthy things, taking time for ourselves to be able to like think and like stretch our brain because our brain's a muscle, right? So like
Absolutely.
be able to stretch your brain, perform those calisthenics, but also uh, keep yourself hydrated and get the proper amount of sleep because your brain over time, if you don't sleep properly, if you get damage to it, it needs to recover. And so like being able to have that recovery time, that build up time, that the time to fix yourself, it's very important.
Absolutely. And then before became live, I was stressing how I'm not really getting much sleep right now.
Yeah. Hey man, I
uh,
don't sleep well at all either.
but there's reason behind that, man. Things are
Yeah.
very busy for me right now, but that's cool. Busy is good.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned that the brain is a muscle, also an organ. With that being said, it kind of leads me right into where I was going to start today. So basically, most people have the idea that we don't use all of our brain. We use maybe 10%. After doing some research, I found some different information, but going off of what I just said, what are your thoughts on that?
On about humans only use about 10% of our brain.
Hmm.
I believe that to be fact.
Okay.
If you look at some of the more miraculous people throughout history, some of the inventors, some of the people that shaped the way that we operate around the world,
Hmm.
uh, I like to think that they were using a little bit more than 10% of their brain.
Hmm.
Uh, but I feel like to some degree we use our full brain. I think
Hmm.
because every part of the brain serves its purpose, but
Hmm.
I think to a degree, or being able to put that part or those parts in your brain in a maximum drive. I don't think that we've seen that.
All right. Good answer. I like that, which is very helpful for where I'm trying to go with this. So let's talk about the brain being a muscle for a minute, because let's just use your body. If you're working out and you utilize your bicep more than your tricep, eventually that bicep is going to be at a bigger size than the tricep.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of that type of concept with the brain and using it. Um, I would say if you're more positive, then you're probably strengthening the positive portion of how your brain functions. Um, and also, that would kind of be the same result if you use more negativity.
Hmm.
Uh, so with that being said, when you're dealing with people and talking to people, and most of their comments, let's say if they're negative, just automatically jump out negative,
Yeah,
then more than likely they're utilizing the negative aspect of their brain more than anything else, because those muscles or that usage of normality is kicking off before they can even realize what they're doing. What do you think of
absolutely.
that?
Oh, I would agree. I used to be a very negative person,
Hmm.
so the way that I would interact with people would be very negative. But I would,
Hmm.
not just with the brain and the way that I was thinking, but also in my body. You can feel it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a book that calls "The Body Keeps the Score," and it talks about like the different ways that your body reacts to your emotions and your feelings, and so like
Hmm.
the way that your brain way that your brain operates under negativity is absolutely wild, right? You start walking
Yeah.
around feeling like you're in a haze, and like you're
Mm.
just always like upset or angry about something. There you always get to this point where like things just can't get better. But like if you shift it and you like start focusing on the positivity and the things around you, I equate it like this. Like it's like somebody finally took the blinders off of me
Mm.
when I started thinking positive and like being positive and actually believing it. And it was like
Hmm.
somebody took the blinders off and I could see the world in vivid color. And
Wow.
it was this amazing thing. So you literally your body and your brain and your eyes react to thinking positive and believing in the positivity that you're thinking.
Wow. Um, Great point. And also, to highlight what you were saying about we use 100% of our brain, um, that's basically the information I found. For some reason, people have the idea that we only use 10%, but we use 100%. It's just how we use it. And the people that you were talking about, the brilliant minds or whatever, uh, it's probably that they were utilizing their brain more effectively
Yeah.
uh, in those percentages, to where they excelled, or I guess seemed elite when it came to their thought process and how they viewed things. What are your thoughts?
I would agree. I would agree. I think that some of those bright minds that we seen through history, the inventors, creators, everything like that. I think that they were using their mind more effectively and more efficiently than we would, right? And they were, or than we have, and they were, diving into things and like I guess the best way I can put it is they didn't get to that point where they stopped, right? Like we have this,
Mm,
like I think we have this innate ability as human beings to get to that point where we're happy and then we stop and we're like,
mm,
this is as far as it gets, right? This is as good as it's going to get. And I feel
mhm,
like they took their brain and they said, but wait, there's more. Let's turn this up. And they just kept going.
mhm.
Um, and their contributions to society, their contributions to humanity are astounding.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. People get to a place of comfort, or they get to a place where they're like, I'm good. I'm happy with what I got now. I don't want to push past this. I just want to be complacent, and they're actually doing humanity in society a huge disservice.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh, I think if people push themselves past their comfort zone and continually push, that's usually when we see the the um, the extraordinary results,
Mhm.
or we get past the norm of what everybody else is doing, and we rise above and start to be considered an overachiever.
Yeah.
Um, when you look into things like sports or the Olympics or whatever, um, you see all these super athletes competing against each other, and then let's do track and field for example. uh, One or two people just take off and leave everybody else in the dust, you
Yeah.
know. uh, that's because they probably put in that extra time, or put in that extra focus towards preparing their body for that type of speed or performance. You got any thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that that and I hate to say it, but I feel like the world we're full, like now in this day and age that we're in, we're full of a lot of complacency, right? Like
Mhm.
we get
Yeah.
to that, like you said, we get to that point where it's like this is as good as it's gonna get, and it can't get any better, right?
Mm,
But then you see people like Usain Bolt who like dominated track and field, right? And then
mhm,
you see some of these greatest of all time quarterbacks, your Tom Brady's,
mhm.
that are just consistently stepping up their game every year.
Yeah.
Uh, and you see those people that are shaping the way the game is played, the way that track and field is played. I mean, look,
Mhm.
if we didn't have Leonardo da Vinci way back in the day, right? Like
Mhm.
we wouldn't have half of what we had now, or it would have been delayed. And had he been like, "Oh, I just discovered how we can fly in the moment,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I'm just gonna put like half of a wing out there, right? We'll let humanity figure out the other half of the wing."
Uh-huh.
Right. If he stopped at that, then we wouldn't have some of these wild inventions, some of these different ways that we look at structural, molecular structure of the body, uh,
Absolutely.
and like just any of this, right? If the Sistine Chapel got painted halfway, right up on that ceiling, people would
Uh-huh.
be like, "Hey, man, there's a whole lot of life up there, but what's
Yeah.
next?"
Right.
And so, like, I think that if those artists and those inventors, creators, if they just got complacent and with like, it's all right, we wouldn't have the marvels that we have, right? Being able to go anywhere and see, landmarks in history, even here in the
Absolutely.
United States, man. Even here in the United States, going to Chicago and seeing the landmarks there, going
Mhm.
throughout the world, right? Like you wouldn't be able to have those things had it not been for the creators. And if they were like, oh, I'm just gonna stop halfway, we're good. Right. I think that like as a society and as humanity, we need to get back to that
Mhm.
point where we're like, hey man, there's so much more for us out there. And it starts up here.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Going right along with the plan here. Um, because you mentioned that, and you mentioned that you dabble in mental health a little bit. I have a question. Is this something that is new, or is this something that has always been there? Because um, when we talk about how people are uh, not giving it their full effort, or just being satisfied with what they have and not really putting much into going beyond that.
Yeah.
Uh, how and where does mental health fall with that? Does it have something to do with that, or are we going backwards, or is this a place where mental health doesn't have anything to do with it? It's just effort. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And I think mental health has a lot to play into it, right?
Mm-hmm,
Um, and mental health is ever changing day to day, right? Like not
mm-hmm,
just the state of mental health, but like the individual. You know, for me, I suffered and to some degree still suffer from depression and anxiety
mm-hmm,
and PTSD and stuff like that. And each
mm-hmm,
one of those symptoms play into each one, right? So like my depression plays into my anxiety, plays into my PTSD, and vice versa,
okay.
right? And so that also like goes into my motivational levels and my drive.
Mm-hmm,
There's days where I can wake up and I'm like, I'm ready to take on the world. Let's go. I'll walk 1,000 miles and then come back and I'll be fine. And then there's days where I wake up and I'm like, dude, I just don't want to get out of bed. And it has
mm-hmm,
nothing to do with like being tired. It has, everything to do with just like the depression, right? And like seasonal depression is another thing that people don't really take into account. But like
mm-hmm.
the change in the weather is huge, right? Like
Right.
when you go from summer to fall, or in some cases, some states go from summer to winter.
Mm-hmm,
There's a massive lack of vitamin D deficient,
mm,
or
true.
huge vitamin D deficiency. So like you're not getting the sun rays, which in turn you're not getting that vitamin D, and then that plays huge into mental health depressions.
Mm-hmm,
And so like mental health goes a lot into it. Some of the more heavier diagnosis. You've got your bipolars, which are crazy because that's just an absolute mood shift. The way that people operate. Some people can be at extreme highs and then extreme lows.
mm-hmm,
And some schizophrenias go into play there. Same thing. And so like mental health is a huge thing, but like really I think the evolution of mental health is great, and the asset, like people are getting answers, right? And they're getting treatment and they're able to help themselves.
mm-hmm.
But we have this innate ability to put labels on ourselves, right?
Ah,
So like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like we label ourselves and limit ourselves. So when I remember when I first got diagnosed with depression, my depression was here, and then I
Mm-hmm.
got diagnosed and it went because
Oh,
I put that label on myself, right? And
right, right.
I said, "Oh, I'm depressed, so I have, my body literally fell into that depression, and I felt like I couldn't
Wow.
get out of it." Right.
Yeah.
Same thing with anxiety. When I got diagnosed with anxiety, I had panic attacks. Right, like I started getting
Mm-hmm.
panic attacks. Some of these heart racing moments. My
Mm-hmm.
PTSD, same thing. I was having some PTSD moments, and like so when we start to label ourselves, we start to get to this. Like for me, I got to this point where I was like, I can't get better. There's no way of getting better. But I can tell you, like it's been a year since any of those symptoms have been really prevalent in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I started working on every facet of my life, not just like getting sober, but like uh, I started doing counseling, and then I started doing a little bit more or a little bit less traditional counseling, and more of like shaman healing and stuff like that, and stepping into different facets of healing and Reiki and stuff like that. And so like when you start working on all those things, I'm not saying like work on them all at one time, but when you work on
Mm-hmm.
those things, you start working on them, sure, stuff is going to come up, um but life gets a little bit easier, and then you're able to take those labels off yourself, which takes the limits off yourself.
Absolutely, man. That was very well put. So kind of tying back into what we were talking about, the 10% and 100% of how we use our brain and how it can sometimes get off balance. Uh, so maybe that's the key,
Yeah.
you know, balancing. uh, the thought processes in your brain, and kind of when you do that, you notice more. I don't want to say normality,
Yeah.
but you notice more of a change in how things are going, and you feel better, you function better, and you produce better. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I also think like music has a huge deal in it too.
Mm,
Right.
elaborate.
I never thought about I love music, man. Just like
Hmm.
anything. You put something on the radio or I got my Spotify up almost all the time.
Uh-huh.
And so like I listen to a lot of different genres, right? I listen to rock, metal, rap. Like, you're from Kansas City, man. I love Tech Nine. Tech Nine is one of
Yeah,
my favorite artists, right?
right, right.
But I also listen to a lot of different forms of meditative music, and
Okay.
right. And so like I know for me personally, and I've seen some studies. If you put certain genres of music on for an extended period of time, it
Mm,
either increases or decreases the functionality of the brain.
mm,
But also, like if you put meditative music on, it can unlock certain things within the brain, and then like a lot of people have had these epiphanic moments in time when they were listening to music, and it was because that music unlocks something in our brain. It's like that key, a little pinhole key, and it just and it
mm.
opens that door up, right? So music can have a huge way that our brain functions, but it can also be a huge deficit.
Depending on what type of music you're listening to.
Yep. Yep.
So music could be more of a stimulant for the
Yep.
brain to open up and expand, or just create.
Yep. Absolutely.
And myself, I kind of fall in that category because I create music.
Yep.
So I can definitely identify with that, um, especially, when I'm creating something. It's a different process. It's weird because sometimes I'm trying to force myself to create,
Yep.
and it's like I get locked.
Yep.
It's weird. It's kind of I hit a wall or something, and then I noticed that once I relax, then that's when the beauty happens. You know what
Yep.
I'm saying? So yeah, the brain is a very unique and interesting organ, uh, and we definitely have to take care of it, um, so that it can function properly and push us to that next level if we so choose to, and hopefully we choose to. Um, Moving forward, man, there's something that came up called the midlife crisis, and when this was established, I guess they were focusing more on the ages between 40 and 60.
Yep.
And I think there's some relevance there, but I also think that there's a shift in that to a younger age to these days. What are your thoughts?
I think so. I think it really all depends on the person, right?
Mm,
But I also think like if we're looking at midlife crisis, uh, I think it's like it's our brain's way of saying we don't want to hit this next phase of our life because we've seen what this next phase of our life looks like.
hmm
If we are surrounded by an environment where people are dying at an accelerated rate at 50, 60 years old,
hmm
naturally we don't want to step into that, right? Because I'm not trying to die at 50, 60 years old,
Right.
right? But if we live in an environment where people are thriving into their 90s, hundreds, right? Like that is like one of those things where we're like, okay, we're gonna usher this in, and we're okay. But I think that midlife crisis really depends on the person. And I laughed when you said midlife crisis because my mom's in a midlife crisis. Mom went from like a normal, I mean, who's
Mhm.
normal nowadays? But like
Yeah, right.
she went from like a normal, hey, that's my mom, to what is happening? Like this woman changed
Uh-huh.
her hair color 3 different colors. You got a whole bunch of piercings, and I'm like, Mom, you work in a nursing home? Like, what are you doing? What are you
Yeah,
doing?
And I'm seeing a lot more of that for some reason. It's not it's all ages. I'm seeing like people who are probably grandparents, doing things like that, tattoos, whatever you name it, and along with the younger generation. And when I think of things like that, midlife crisis, I think of situations that people deal with. Um, so as I was looking through this, when people deal with things like divorce, um, that can come about, or like you said, when they hit a certain age, uh, that can come about, and even people who aren't prepared for life after high school.
Oh yeah.
They kind of hit a slump or whatever if they can't figure out what they want to do, and parents are not quite taking as much care of them as they were before.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm an adult now. We got all this responsibility. What do I do now?
Yeah.
You have any thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I think you hit a nail on the head with life events, and you also hit a nail on the head with age too. Like on being unprepared. I was
Hmm.
actually one of those people. Now looking back, right? I wasn't,
Hmm.
and I hate to use this word socialized, but it
Hmm.
lack of better terms. Um, I wasn't socialized when I was a kid, right? So like outside of going to school, I didn't have friends. I lived with my grandparents, and that was it. And
Hmm.
so when I moved up with my dad, there was a huge shift culturally for me, but there was also a huge shift socially for me. I went from
Hmm.
having no friends to like, hey, I have an abundant amount of people that I can call friend,
Hmm.
and so who wants to be my friend? And but life just like got crazy. I didn't really understand the concept of how to socialize, how to interact with people. And so when I
Hmm.
became an adult, literally I graduated high school, stepped foot in the army like a month later, and I was like, oh man, I have no idea about how to, pay bills. I don't know. Just life was crazy. And so like I say that I was stunted in my mental health, or like the functionality of my brain. But if you look like scientifically speaking, men's brains don't fully develop till I think we're 25, and women
Hmm.
is like 21 to 23.
Hmm.
Um, we don't fully develop. So at some point, I was like, oh, 25, I'll be okay. But 25, I wasn't okay, right? So
Right. Right.
I had a whole lot of life lessons to learn in order to get to where I am today, man. And I think that,
Hmm.
it's just it's life lessons if we're able to get to that point where we're like we surrender to the idea that like we don't know everything and we have to learn
Hmm.
a lot more.
Interesting that you use the word surrender. Let's go there for a second. And it's kind of what we're talking about throughout all this. Uh, People kind of give up uh, with everything, and I'm wondering why. Is there a reason why people get to a point where they just don't try anymore, or they give up, or they surrender? Uh, what are your thoughts on
I think we're surrendering to the wrong things, right?
that? Okay.
As a society, we have surrendered, in my opinion, we have surrendered to Hollywood. We've surrendered to sports. If you look at some of the most highest paid people in the world, it's
Hmm.
actors, athletes, obviously business owners. Like you got your Jeff Bezos, your Elon Musk's,
Hmm.
but most generally, your highest paid people in the world are actors or athletes, right?
Hmm.
And so we've kind of surrendered or given up, to individuality, in place of your Michael Jordans, your LeBron Jameses, your Leonardo DiCaprios, your Margot Robbies, and we really stopped trying to be individuals and like individualize ourselves. And like the aspect of surrender that I look at is a lot different than the aspect of surrender that I see around, right?
Okay.
So like for me, surrendering is surrendering to a higher power, somebody that something that is above me, below me, what have you. I don't even know, but something that
Hmm.
is greater than myself that's going to keep me going, on something that I can communicate with, that I have faith in, and that ultimately at the end of the day, I can say, hey, I believe in this. But the
Okay.
surrendering I see all over the place is insane.
Mm.
You know, and I see a lot of it, and I think we really give up because, you know, over time somewhere we lost our drive, right? Like we
Mm.
lost our individuality, we lost our drive, we lost what makes us special, right? And we
Mm.
surrendered to this idea that that, you know, this is how it has to be versus
Mhm.
this is what it can be, right? Like this is how it
Right.
has to be, right? Like so if you know, for me as a veteran, uh the idea is I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be an addict or an alcoholic, I'm going to end my life a certain time after the army or after
Mm.
service, right? That is what society kind of has put on us, right? Because that's
Mm.
what we see. N22 a day, right?
Mhm.
But when I shifted that focus from like this is who I am to like this is what can be, this is the possibilities that I can face,
Mhm.
or that I can work toward and achieve, that dynamic changes, right? And it's not just the mental state, but it's the physical state too. Some of the more physical laboring things that like go on in the body for me shifted into, and I talk about that, you know, I say this in some of the groups that I'm in. It goes from the have to the want to. Like I have to survive to I want to survive, right? Like I have to go and work this job to I want to, right? Like I enjoy it now.
Mhm.
This is something I really like to do, and so I think that once we get to this point of like surrendering, we've kind of given up our individuality to a degree. Like I said, if you're looking at a higher power, something greater than yourself, something much
Mhm.
higher, then you surrender to a greater cause. But if you're surrendering to like Hollywood, to music, to a TV show,
Mhm.
then we have given away our individuality, and we have to, as a society, find that again.
Absolutely. And some things that I was thinking about and writing down as you were talking is some statements that came about in society that really irritate me when I hear them, because it's actually what people actually start to think after they say these things and hear them so many times. And the first one is, "It's all that we can do." You know, that kind of drives me crazy when I hear people say that. You got any thoughts on that?
Mm. I hate those limiting statements,
Hmm.
all of them, right?
Hmm.
Limiting statements, I despise them because once again, you put a label on yourself and you put a limit on yourself on the
Yep.
capacity of things that you're quote unquote able to do, but that you're willing to do, right?
Right.
Some people aren't willing. It's not it's not a fact of like not capable of it because we're all capable of it,
Hmm.
just you're not willing to do that. You're not willing to go that extra distance. You're not willing to step foot into the unknown.
Hmm.
You're not willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. And you talked earlier about getting out of comfort zone, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Nobody wants to get outside their bubble, man. And when
Hmm.
you get outside your bubble, that's where the magic happens. And
Absolutely.
you know, whether it's getting outside your bubble of like, hey, I'm gonna, you know, I think that I'm a great singer, but does Joe down the road who has a that has a record label, does he know that I'm nah, I'm gonna leave Joe alone, right? Because Joe
Hmm.
want to hear me sing, but Joe may need to hear you sing,
Right.
so you can get that record deal, right?
Absolutely.
And so like people are so afraid of failure and so afraid of like stepping outside of that bubble that it's like, oh well, this is the best that we can do. Well, no, that's not the best that you can do, because the best you can do, you haven't done yet.
Right. Exactly, man. Well put. Well put. Um, Another statement that I think has been out for way too long is, "It is what it is." Uh, I hear that and I just cringe every time. Even in fact, even the first time I heard that, I was like, "Really?" um, you know, those type of statements, man. I think those are ambition killers. You know, and for people to listen to those things and repeat them over and over again and then become to believe them, um, I think that's worse than drinking a glass of acid.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think that point's well taken. I'm going to kind of shift gears here in the conversation and kind of focus on the thought process
Yep.
and how our thought process can be used uh, to our advantage, or wake people up in how they're using their thought process uh, to hurt themselves,
Yep.
knowingly or not knowing. And what I found was interesting enough that there are like 39 thought processes
Mm-hmm.
that people may not even be aware of. And of course, some of them I'm sure they've heard of, but I don't think I'll have time to get to all of them today.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight some of the ones that kind of stood out that I think are the biggest causes of why things are going the way they are today with our uh, usage of our brain, with our, in some cases, mental health, and in some cases, midlife crisis or whatever. So the first one I got down here is creativity. We kind of talked about that. uh, People have amazing talent, and I see it every day, uh, regardless of what it is. I mean, I've seen people draw some things that are absolutely incredible. I've seen people write some things that are just completely beautiful that just blow your mind away. I've just seen people just do creative things like with arts and crafts or whatever. Um, and I always seem to ask the question, what are you going to do with that? What is your goal with that? Oh, yeah, I just do this for whatever, to pass the time. And I'm like, what a waste of
Right.
great talent. That's, I don't say that to them, but I actually think that. What are your thoughts on that? And should something be said?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly with you.
Mhm.
And I think that it moves for me. I've seen that too, and I've personally witnessed a lot of that. And like I start to think like, what are they telling themselves, right? And like
Mhm.
I've heard some statements that in that where it's just like, oh, I don't know, I'm just not that good.
Mm.
What?
Wow. Wow.
What? What? Like you have this innate ability to stir something, right? What art is and what creative art is like the ability to invoke an emotion, right? Like
Boom. Yeah, absolutely.
right. So like whether it's like I love that, I hate that, like it's beautiful, art is about invoking an emotion. And so
Mhm.
like these when people limit themselves, in a way they're limiting the viewer too. And I hate to say it, kind of sounds like gaslighting, but like uh
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
is limiting the viewer, the person that's seeing this, because they're like, oh, I'm just not that good. Well, in my opinion, you are phenomenal,
Yeah,
right?
right. Mhm.
Right, like, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like I can look at my girlfriend and I can say you were the most beautiful woman I have seen in my life, and I
Mhm.
love you. But if she looks in the mirror and doesn't see that, that's on her.
Right, right.
um, so I think what we feed ourself, some of our creative brains. And I used to do it too. I play guitar. I played guitar, played drums, and people are like, "Oh man, you were just awesome. Great job." And I'm like, I could get better." And that's our negative brain, right? That's our negative
Mhm.
thought process saying they're lying. That's not true. That's not honest,
Right.
right? And I have a hard time taking compliments, and there's no real reason why I have a hard time taking compliments, but I think that's as a society where we have a hard time taking compliments, whether it's us looking at the person who's given us the compliment or our own insecurities surrounding that compliment. Um, I think that like our creative brains, if we're able to like take that criticism, we call it constructive criticism, constructive criticism, or if we're able to take that compliment and sit with it and be comfortable with it, and accept it for what it is, accept it for face
Mhm.
value. I think that
Mhm.
like our creative brains will be able to like really expand some more, and like exercising it too, right? Because Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right. Exactly.
So like being able to hone in on those things and like get better at it. I've seen some amazing artists, like you were saying. I've seen some amazing artists that do a lot of murals, and
Hmm.
they're like, yeah, like you said, I just do this for fun. I do this for the side. And I'm like, dude, what? Like
Right.
you could sell your art right now for hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
and be the next Van Gogh, dude. What are you doing?
Exactly.
Get off your butt. Sorry, I was gonna say the other word. Get off your butt and go do something about it. And people are
Mhm.
just, oh, I don't have the experience. I don't have a degree from, NYU or Juilliard. Who cares? Who
Right.
cares? Did Van Gogh have those degrees? No, he didn't. Get up off your butt and go do something about it.
Absolutely, man. And I always say this, and I'm probably going to say it a lot more. It's not really where you start, but it's that you start, and once you start, then and keep going, then you'll end up wherever you're supposed to be, regardless if you have an education or not. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who are massively successful without having any education at all. They just jumped in and did it. We're all driving cars
Yeah.
because of one of those creations, and because of another, we're able to do this podcast on a computer
Yeah.
system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna backtrack just a second because you said a couple things that really struck out or stood out. Our own insecurities, and I'm gonna use the example that you brought with your girlfriend. Um, I think on these brain functions and whatnot, the thought processes, one of them is vision.
Mhm.
So when I look at things, uh, I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but I look at things in their completed form.
Mhm.
So I can look at, say, for instance, a person without makeup, without their hair done, and kind of just see them with all that stuff completed and be like, wow, they're really an amazing individual. Um, but like you said, they can look in the mirror and be like, oh, I look like crap,
Yeah.
which makes them probably feel like crap. But you got to look at the completed self that or your potential self. What would you look like if you had a different hairstyle, or if you had the right makeup, or the right outfit? Uh, you know, I think people need to shift their mind process in how they look at things, because yeah, some days we wake up and we feel like crap and look like crap, but what are your possibilities? You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think if we start to use those mental strengths and muscles in our brain and thought process, then that'll be an energy boost for just about everybody. You shouldn't feel good just because you went and got your hair and nails done. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You, you, you
Yeah.
should feel good all the time, knowing what you will look like, I guess, if you did have your hair and nails done. You know what I mean? It's like the self-esteem issue that needs to be addressed. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I agree. I think that being able to shift our focus away from the negativity and like seeing ourselves for the way that somebody else might see us for the way that we see ourselves, right?
Hmm.
I think manifestation has a lot to do with that, right? Manifesting what you want. I guess that's been kind of like one of the lack of things I've said this whole time. Um,
Right?
Manifesting, right? Manifesting what you want and really working on that, honing on that manifesting. Uh, Manifestation works if you work on it and you work on it hard, right? And that I guess that's the key of what we're getting at in this whole episode is like we're
Absolutely.
working on it. You got to consistently work on it, right?
Hmm.
But like realizing, like also looking in yourself and realizing like you don't we strive too hard to be Kim. We strive too hard to be Beyonce, Taylor
Hmm.
Swift.
Hmm.
Who have you? But we're not focusing on being the one person that can give us love, and that's ourselves, right?
Boom. Perfect.
You
You
know,
hit it right on the nose.
we
Uh,
focus too hard on being Kim, Beyonce, Taylor, Iggy Azalea, whoever we want to be, versus who we are, and the
mhm.
one person that can give us that love, and that's yourself, right? Like my girlfriend can't look at me and say something to me that's gonna. I mean, she could move me,
Mhm.
right? But like, I ultimately have the power and the control over myself to be like, you are a great individual, and you will live every day to the best of your capability. I'm the only
Man,
person who can do that.
man. So another thought process is judgment. And I think you're hitting on that right now, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Um, I hear this a lot, especially when there's a compliment given to someone, um, and they'll reply like in a negative way, but it'll be a specific reply like, "Well, I need to lose so many pounds," or something on the lines of that. And and you complimented them, and then they reply or remark with a negative uh, a reply about themselves. You
Yeah.
know, so instead of saying, "Oh wow, thank you," and taking it as an energy boost or some type of taking it for what it is, like you said, the compliment.
Yeah.
They downshoot themselves on a compliment that somebody else just gave them. That's incredibly amazing, but this is happening so much every day. And I guess my response to that is, okay, if you feel like personally you could lose a few pounds, then just do what it takes to do that, and you can be happier with yourself, right?
Yeah.
You know, yes, it's easy to shove a burger down your throat, and a lot more easier to do that than it is to go hit the treadmill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if this is really truly what you desire and want, why not go for it?
Yeah. Well, it's I guess one thing that kept playing in my head when you were saying that is like Kanye said it best, man. I always find something wrong,
Hmm.
right? Like we can look at ourselves and oh, I gotta lose that 5 pounds. Okay, we
Hmm.
can lose that five. Well, it's five more. Summer's coming up. I gotta get that body right.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
and we always find something wrong with ourselves instead of looking at ourselves and saying like this compliment's genuine and I should accept it and start
Yeah.
trying to work on believing it.
Hmm.
Um, I had an instance this past week where every single day, every phone call, my girlfriend calls or I call her when she's at work. I'll say, "You were the most beautiful woman I've ever met in my life."
Hmm.
Right, and I say that to like get her to this point where she starts thinking that, right?
Hmm.
and,
Right.
and like if I'm planting the seeds, maybe she will sow it, you know.
Absolutely.
And so, I plant those seeds. And this week, when I said that, I was like, "You are the most beautiful woman that I have ever met in my life." She
Hmm.
said, "I know," and I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
"Finally, you're getting it."
But you know what? I'm gonna ask you this while the listeners are here, either now or later. How many times did you have to repeat yourself or repeat that for her to finally get that
Her and I
and
have been
say it
together
herself?
for a year. Her and I have been together for a year.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, yeah,
But that's how things are working for some reason. You have to continually, and I mean continually, just repeat, 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 repeat until it finally sinks in through
yeah.
that thought process that they're in, which is usually a negative
Hmm.
view of themselves or whatever, man. Um, so I'm glad you said that because I really wanted to highlight that, and I think that was the best way to do it
Yeah,
because even in work, in dealing with people, um, we can repeat ourselves so many times, and they just won't get it.
yeah,
You know, for whatever reason, wherever they at in life or how they're looking at things, and then one day something clicks and they actually hear what you're saying and process it, and they start doing what you've been turning blue in the face repeating all the time
yeah.
for who knows how long, and then they're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense, it saves a lot more time, and you're like, right, duh.
Saved you all the time. Me, I've been at this for a minute.
Man, so it's just amazing, not only how the mind works but how people use their mind. And that's kind of the purpose of this episode today, is to get people to realize where they are in the thought process and do what they need to do to alter that thought process so that they can take it to the next level. Um, so there's some other things here I want to highlight today. And I'll start here. Everything begins with a thought. What
Okay.
is your response to that?
I would agree. I think everything does begin with a thought, but also, well, no, that's true because the action has to come from a thought,
Yeah.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
I was going to say a thought is, a thought and a behavior are caused by an action, but that action had to have a thought and behavior behind it, right? So
Boom.
that is true. That is very true.
Yeah. So, and I think when people don't realize how important a thought is or how effective a thought is, and they lose sight of that, then that's when the depression kicks in. That's when the low self-esteem kicks in. Uh, that's when they're just not happy with their
Yeah.
appearance or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so when you realize how important your thoughts are, when you come to that realization, you're very careful of how you think,
Yep.
and you're even more careful of what you say and speak,
Yep.
because when you realize that those two things, thinking and speaking, how valuable they are
Yeah.
to your present and your future, and how things flow for you, then you become protective of your thoughts, I guess, and
Yep.
your words, and then you become more careful of how you use your thoughts and your words. What do you got for that?
I agree. I agree. I think one of the things that I dislike hearing the most is I wasn't thinking. Like, okay, I said this, but I wasn't thinking. Well,
Mhm.
true, because subconsciously you may have been thinking that, right? And if
Yeah,
it isn't a
absolutely.
conscious thought, it's a subconscious thought, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
packed away over 100 days, years, is a subconscious thought, right? And
Yeah,
that's okay to
absolutely.
have this, right? But like to say
Hmm.
you weren't thinking, you were thinking. You had to think because your arm had to move, right? So there's
Right.
some fire in the brain which makes you think. And
Absolutely.
so I hate when we resort, or I dislike when we resort to that thought or that saying I wasn't thinking because you had to think to say that thought.
Right. Right.
Come
Exactly.
on, come on.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense. They didn't think that one through.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
uh, so I'm gonna shift again, and this is gonna go into, like, I mentioned vision, but prediction, dreaming, deja vu, things of that nature. I know you deal with a lot of things, or your shows cover a lot with your background and how you may have some insight on things. What are those things? How do you approach those things, and what do they mean to you?
Oh man, when I get deja vu, it's trippy. It's like it doesn't happen as much now as it used to, but it used to
Uh-huh.
happen quite
Hmm.
frequently.
Hmm.
And I didn't know if it was like I'm stepping into alternate reality or this is a dream or premonition of sorts. Um, and not to sound woo woo, but I think everybody has like the abilities that
Hmm.
a lot of psychic mediums have. But because of what we're talking about here in the brain and the functionality of the brain and not tapping into some of those things,
Hmm.
um, we don't use our brain to the full to that capability, right? And I
Hmm.
think a lot of times we were told as kids. I know for me, I was told as kids like that's not real,
Hmm.
right? Like okay,
Right.
you may not think it's real, but that doesn't mean that it's not real, right? Like who
Right.
knows if ghosts are real? Who knows if demons are real? Who
Hmm.
knows if any of this is real? But like
Right.
it's been proven that brain waves are amplified when people are under a psychic spell or they're doing something um supernaturally. The brain waves are a lot more active, right? There's a book that
Hmm.
I was just listening to. It's called um it's called You Are the Placebo. and it talks about a whole bunch of different things. Great book.
Mhm.
But they did a study on this woman, and they couldn't figure it out because she was in a full meditative state. Like, we're talking about, like, they waved their hand in front of her eyes. She wasn't
Mhm.
moving. She was
Mhm.
breathing. But the doctor would sit behind her and wave at her, and she would just wave right back at him in a full
Behind
meditative
her. Behind her.
behind
Wow.
her. And she said, I had this ability to see behind me, and I seen you waving at me. And so they brought in like brainwave machines and attached it to her, and they seen that her brain was functioning at a rate of, she was having a conversation or seeing things or interacting. And the doctor that was performing this was like, oh, she's having a conversation. And the other doctor was like, no, 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 I got to correct you, she's seeing. And he waves at her, and both of those doctors seen her wave back, and
Wow.
like in a full meditative state. And so, like, that's another area that I like to step in. I love meditation. I love
Mhm.
it. It's helped me out tremendously.
Mhm.
But I think that our brain also is unlocks something else that I have not been able to put my finger on yet. Right? It unlocks something else inside of our brain to put it in hyperdrive to
Mhm.
change the way our brain works, the way our brain functions. And so, yeah, I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what happens, but all I
Mhm.
know is that it does happen, and it's unexplainable to me.
Absolutely, man. And I'm gonna highlight something too, because I've had dreams before, and I will wake up and I'll be like, that made absolutely no sense. I was here with this person, and this was going on, and that was going on. I mean, that
Yeah.
just didn't make sense. And then maybe 1, 2 years down the road, I'm reminded of that through deja vu, and I'm like, hold up, wait a minute, I've
Yeah.
been here before. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so yeah, I can definitely identify with that to a degree.
Yeah.
However, I wasn't able to control that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It was like something that happened that my brain did, but I didn't know how I did it. I couldn't control it or function in that manner, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And if you're able to trigger those functions or work towards whatever, maybe,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
If you're talking about dreams, I had a dream when I was 25. I'm 35 now. I had a dream when I was
Hmm.
25, and it was weird. It was like I was laying on this bed thing, and I was looking up at the ceiling, and it was just very bland. It was like a ceiling, but it had like this very specific light fixture.
Hmm.
And then it was like I seen like this timeline. It stopped at 35, and I was like, what's going to happen? And it worried me over the years, right? Over the
Hmm.
years. About a month ago, I went to go do a Reiki healing session. I'm laying there, and I opened my eyes, and it was like I was back in that dream. The
Hmm.
fixture was there that I seen in my dream. The very specific fixture was in my dream, and I'm 35 years old. And
Wow.
I was like, just dumbfounded in that moment, because it was nothing to be worried about, but I was just like so fixated on this like idea of like, I'm gonna die at 35. Right?
Yeah.
This is crazy, but like our brain and the dreams have like and it's just one of those things where it's like just the most random thing that could happen.
Hmm. And there was that connection in that dream
Yeah.
at your age of 35. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, man, that's that's amazing. We can probably get into a whole lot more and go on longer.
Yeah.
But we're entering into our hour-long session, and man, it's been great.
Yeah.
What do you think? You like this today?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. I like stepping away from telling my story and some of the more other obscure things that I talk about, and talk about some of the things that actually matter, because our brain
Mm.
matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be pretty much nothing at all without it. you
Absolutely,
know,
absolutely. Be vegetables.
right. So, man, I really appreciate you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Sean Young, joining the show today and giving us some of his insight on how the brain functions and how the brain works, and some mental health things and whatnot. Uh, Man, thanks for everybody that tuned in. Janet, I see you there. Appreciate you joining us once again. One of our uh, supporters that's been hanging in there with us. I really appreciate that. See a couple other people that have joined us and hung out with us. Some people kind of jumped in and out, probably got stuff going on, but we understand. You can always watch this later. But yeah, man, you got anything else to wrap the show up? Want to tell us about something you got coming up?
Man, I'm just plugging away at the podcast and stuff, man. Just living every day, every week. I'm in the middle of becoming a shaman healer, so
Oh, wow.
that's where a lot of this gets coming into. So yeah, man. That's just what I'm working on, man. Trying to help humanity out the best that I can with my gifts.
Hey, man, that's what we're trying to do here as well. Whether it's different aspects of helping people out, it all helps in different areas. So, man, we appreciate you once again. Hopefully you can come back and do this later on a different topic or whatever. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, that's life. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.